Broadcasting live from Forward Observer Central Command in Austin, Texas. It's the man always out front on the issues. You're listening to Out Front with Mike Shelby.
Hello and happy Tuesday to everyone. It's 2 o'clock somewhere. So we'll go ahead and get started. Since I was out last week, I said, you know what? I'll head into the office today on Veterans Day. We'll do a show. Yeah, shout out to all the veterans out there, of course. Happy Veterans Day. Hope you got your Starbucks. I don't do not Starbucks. Sorry, Applebee's. I don't know where my head's at. Last night, I was violently ill with food poisoning, and I'm still kind of under the weather right now. So we'll get through it. I do have a full show for everyone today, and we will get there. With that, today, the main topic, the big thing that I want to point out to everyone today is I want to point out that color revolutions are a form of irregular warfare, and this is so vital to understand because we are seeing the building blocks of a color revolution being assembled right now. And next year, I think they're planning No Kings 3.0 for March 26th. I think that's probably in Afghanistan. It's not really a joke, but it's like every spring. It's like, okay, the Taliban spring offensive is about to kick off in the springtime. Once the snow melts and the mountain passes are navigable and people start moving around again after the winter, yeah, we'll see. So March 2026, No Kings 3.0. That may be the kind of the kickoff to the 26 festivities. Next year's going to be a long year. Also, all right. With that, let's go ahead and. I want to cover, a couple people have asked me about this. Listen, I have not followed this whatsoever other than just the stuff that I see on X. I really don't know. I don't know what to make of it. And apparently this journalist over at The Blaze came out and he said, look, we think we've narrowed this suspect down, the J6 pipe bomber who done it. We think it's some lady, I don't even know what her name is. And I don't even know why he thinks it's this individual, other than she was on the Capitol Police Department. And then 6 months later, she apparently gets hired on at CIA and goes, and I don't even know what she does there. There was some speculation that she was added to some kind of personal security detail, and then something like this was, and basically I think they kind of said this is kind of her reward for dressing up and planting these pipe bombs on J6 outside wherever they were planted, and this was her reward. And now they found her, and they did this gait analysis, which is a gait analysis is a form of biometrics, and I know a lot about biometrics. My last contract job, I was doing biometrics, things like latent fingerprints, DNA, facial recognition. We didn't do any gait analysis, but voice recognition, that's another biometric. So at any rate, a gait analysis, you can take two videos basically of a person walking, and you can say, apparently with 96% certainty, this gait analyst guy, whoever this was, said, yeah, I'm 96% sure this is the same person based off the gait, the way you walk. I don't know about that. Gait analysis is real. And it's one reason why, people, they say, put your pebble in your shoe, or if you're trying to defeat certain surveillance measures like, gait analysis, for instance, change how you walk. I don't know. That's just what they say. So at any rate, and then a couple people came out and they said, well, I've talked to my sources and they actually don't think it's her. So this is a mystery. It's been a mystery. It's an even greater mystery now. Yeah, gait analysis. Okay, let's talk about this. I left my job in 2012, so 13 years ago. I would tell you everything in biometrics has just improved, obviously, over the past 13 years. I don't know anything about gait analysis other than generally what it is. Facial recognition was extremely accurate. DNA is obviously extremely accurate. Oh, I forgot to mention, iris scans they were like 98% accurate. Basically, if you get two pictures of an iris, which is a part of your eye, it has certain patterns, and you can match those up. And now I'm sure it's done by AI. And if you were identified through iris, like that's you, pretty much. But multimodality just is a fancy term of saying confirming someone's identity based off of multiple modes of biometrics. So if you got fingerprints, you've got DNA, you got iris, like you found the dude. This is the guy that you're looking for, obviously, if you're getting a match on all three. So at any rate, facial recognition was pretty accurate. The way this happens is these images get fed into a database. And let's take latent prints, for instance. Okay, so a latent print examiner, well, first it goes through a bomb tech. Let's say in Afghanistan, my last tour, there's EOD recovers a pressure plate, which is an ID trigger device, and not terribly complex. And that thing it's wrapped in plastic because you've got to weatherproof all of the wires and the metal in there. So almost always they had a plastic wrapping on there. And guess what? You leave fingerprints on there. Okay, you take that off. And then there's tape. All right, so you can peel the tape off, or do the little latent print examiner dusting the battlefield forensics. You dust for the fingerprints, and then you get the fingerprint, and you take a picture of it. And then after you peel the tape off, you've got wire twists. So people are leaving trace DNA. They're leaving skin cells, basically, on that wire. And that can be harvested and done for DNA. And then this is kind of interesting. So when you leave a fingerprint, you're not just making a print. You are also, if it's hot outside, you could be leaving sweat behind, which means you're now leaving DNA on that latent fingerprint. And so this was kind of a sacrilege back in the day. I don't see why it was, but the forensics people really disliked this. But what they did is once that latent print image was captured, you take a picture of it, because that picture is what goes in the database. Then they swabbed it for DNA. And so we had some of the forensics people saying, yes, this DNA belongs to this, whoever is the owner of this fingerprint, because you swabbed the DNA off the fingerprint. And then you had other forensics people that say, no, it can't work like that. I don't see why it can't work like that. At any rate, so you take this latent print image and you put it in this database. And I think it's probably still this, but back in the day it's called IAFIS, the Integrated Automated Fingerprint Identification System. And so all the latent prints go in there. Latent print means it's a fingerprint that you've taken off something. It could be a door handle, it could be a Coke bottle, it could be literally anything. Ask the people who whenever they had key leadership engagements, and these people were drinking from water from glasses, or they're drinking from Cokes out of a bottle, or whatever. Okay, score one from the home team. So for whatever SSC team went back in there and got all those glasses and Coke bottles and got the fingerprints of these guys. Just as a real world example of how latent prints can be collected. But door handles literally anywhere. You're leaving DNA freaking everywhere. Hair, your hair's falling out. You're leaving skin cells everywhere. Like pretty much anything you touch, it can be tied back to you, just through biometrics. At any rate, you take this latent print image, it goes into IAFIS, and then you take these known enrollments. This is why biometric enrollments were so important. And I'm going off on a really big tangent here, but you have these known enrollments. So this is someone gets stopped at a checkpoint, or they're doing maybe it's a SNAP kind of TCP thing, a traffic control point, where they put up a checkpoint. They're just saying, we're going to biometrically enroll everyone who comes through here for the next 30 minutes. This is in like Iraq and Afghanistan, and there's bats and hides and whatever. There's so many different biometric collection platforms out there. At any rate, so we've got all these known enrollments now. So you have a bunch of these fingerprints that we don't know who they belong to, but we know they're bad guys because they built IEDs, or it was taken off a recovered weapon or recovered an expended cartridge. Okay, I mean, just when you think about when you load magazines, how much DNA and I would just say biometric evidence you are leaving on those things. Yeah, your thumb's on every single one of those rounds. At least a partial latent print is on every single one of those rounds that you put in the magazine. So all that stuff is recoverable. At any rate, so you take all this biometric stuff, and we don't know who's the shooter. We don't know who the bomb builder is, or the 3 or 4 guys who built this pressure plate. But we've got their fingerprints. We've got their DNA. Okay, so now we just got to tie that back into known DNA samples, known buccal swabs. So you swab someone at a checkpoint with you take the thing from their cheek and the little Q-tip, and you stick it in the tube, and then that goes back to a lab somewhere. But now that buccal swab is tied to a known individual. And so DNA, unknown DNA, and known DNA samples are being matched, and latent prints and known fingerprints are being matched. Like, yes, this is the same dude. This is the guy that you were looking for. Basically, that's what would happen. Let's just talk about this. I don't know if this is still the case, but it used to be when you, like our latent print examiners, who would actually go through and make a match. There's some algorithm, I'm sure AI is doing it now, where they're trying to match up. Basically what would happen is you put a latent print image, like this unknown latent print, you don't know who it belongs to, into IFAS, and it would give you could say, like, give me the top 20 or give me the top 50 results that this computer thinks are good matches, and they can do that. And then a latent print examiner or a certified latent print examiner would have to go through and manually, as a human, confirm that the patterns on this latent print and known print were the same. You know, you take a look at your fingers, and there's all these different weird patterns and little different features. I forget exactly what they call them. And that's basically how latent print matching would work. So you could get a latent print. So let's say an AK-47 round or whatever round, a piece of brass was collected over here, and then a couple days later we collected some more brass from over here, and we got a latent match onto it. So that was the same shooter. Well, it may not have been the same shooter. It was the same guy touched those 2 pieces of brass for sure. May have been the same shooter in 2 different events. So you could do that for basically what you could do is once you have enough of those matches, you're building a pattern of life. Say, yes, I know for sure. Well, potentially build a pattern of life. There were some issues that we had, like some pressure plates, like they were up in like Nangarhar or somewhere. It's a province up in like northeast Afghanistan, and those were being emplaced all around there. And then they started popping up in Kandahar. So it's like, well, okay, this is weird. Fingerprints. Okay, fingerprints were on multiple IDs in northeast Afghanistan and southeast Afghanistan. It's very, very weird. It's like, well, did this bomb builder move? Like, was he afraid of being targeted? Now he's come down to Kandahar, gone over to Helmand. I was in my last tour. My 18-month tour was in Kandahar and Helmand. And, well, no, it wasn't that this bomb builder moved. It's that he was just building a bunch of pressure plates, and they're being distributed across the country. So you do have to kind of be a little careful also. I mean, this is why intelligence analysis is very important, because otherwise people would think, oh, this bomb builder moved down to Kandahar. Well, no, he didn't. His pressure plates are just being shipped down to Kandahar, and he is still in Nangarhar or wherever he is, just as an example. At any rate, I digress. All right. Listen, and they said, I don't know, Victor Garden says they said it was DNA 90+%. I don't know. DNA to DNA match should be like pretty damn close to 100%. I don't know what kind of biometrics they were able to recover from the pipe bomb. I don't know any of the details. The whole reason I bring this up is not to inform you of the details of this case, because I don't actually know them. But this is very important because this comes back to analysis. Okay, fundamentally, this is an intelligence analysis problem. Is this the right person or is this the wrong person? And this lady may be extremely wealthy, suing the Blaze and suing this reporter, journalist, or whoever allegedly broke this story. And I want to bring this up because analysis in this case is so important. It's a really great book. I read it about 10 plus years ago. It's called Circle of Treason. It's about Aldrich Ames, and it's by Sandra Grimes and Jean Vertifew, or whatever her name is. They were two counterintelligence analysts. I believe they were counterintelligence analysts at CIA, and they worked with Rick Ames. At any rate, Ames was this very notorious, probably the worst spy in U.S. history. He worked at CIA. He was a counterintelligence officer. He was run by the Soviets for nearly a decade, starting in 1985. He was arrested in 94. And again, it's been 10 plus years since I've read this book, but I believe CIA said they lost like 10 or 11 of their assets in the Soviet Union because Ames was feeding this identity information to his Soviet handlers in exchange for millions of dollars. This should have been, from the very outset, this really should have been an open shut case. Ames made about $60,000 a year at his job. Yet he lived in a $540,000 home. He drove a $40,000 Jaguar. He spent up to $30,000 per month on credit cards, buying like purses and furniture and buying all this stuff for his Colombian wife. And you just do some simple math, and it's like this guy is obviously spending much more than $60,000 a year. And so that should have been a really, really good clue. That's why when you go and fill out your SF-86, which is your standard security clearance form before you go get a clearance, it asks you a lot of things. But one of the things is financial things. It wants the people who are doing the investigation, they want to make sure that you don't have.
Guys, I'm really sorry. Really, really sorry about the audio. Every time I load up this browser, it defaults to my computer microphone and not this microphone. So sorry. Sorry about that. It's fixed now. Yeah. So at any rate, listen, I don't know how much money his wife had, but obviously this guy was spending way more money than he made. So that's one reason why they do this kind of financial audit. When you go to get your security clearance, they want to make sure that you don't have any debts or any financial problems that could be used against you. And they, maybe they assumed it was her money. I'm sure they could have gone in and, maybe found out more. At any rate, this book it's a really good book, but it just goes to show how difficult some of these CIA counterintelligence investigations can be. It took them years to single out Ames as the bull. And at the same time, they were dealing with disinformation from the Soviets. And I don't remember if it's in this book or another book I read on it, but the Soviets, Ames was like very concerned that he was going to be eventually identified. And so the Soviets, they fed some information into various CIA channels, sources, subsources, and they named this guy in Maryland as the actual mole. I forget what the code name for this guy was. And they said, it's this guy in Maryland. And apparently, like they ran off in this wild goose chase in Maryland for a while, and they got kind of distracted from Ames. At any rate, they ended up arresting Ames in 1994. And you know what this reminds me of? I was talking to this PSYOP guy a couple of weeks ago, and he said a psychological operations, the U.S. Army PSYOP, former U.S. Army PSYOP guy. And we were talking about disinformation and psychological operations and feeding information that you want people to believe. Because remember, PSYOP, the goal of PSYOP is to modify certain behaviors by getting people to believe certain things, basically. If you want them to be nice to you, then we feed them certain information so they will not oppose us. If we want them to do whatever, then we give them information that we think will, and I say we in the royal sense, the U.S. Army PSYOP guys, will feed information that they think will modify the behavior. At any rate, he said, the principle here, the 90-10 rule, he said, out of 10 things, 9 things we say will be the absolute verifiable truth, because we want, and this is whatever channel. So this could be official channels. This could be non-official channels. There's like white, gray, and black PSYOP, and maybe I'll have him on to talk about that later. But he said, Basically, 90% of this stuff is the verifiable truth, because when we put out a statement, we want people to believe us. And he said, but it's that 10th thing. That 10th thing is something that is not true, and we want people to believe that. But we cannot get people to believe that 10th thing, which is untrue, unless we give them 9 things that were true. So keep that in mind. And I bring up all this stuff because this ties back into this investigation into the J6, who the J6 pipe bomber was, because Brianna Morello, I think she's over with InfoWars now. She said, another federal employee with knowledge of the J6 pipe bomb investigation tells me they do not believe, here's her name, Shawnee Kirchhoff, had a role in the pipe bomb. The source tells me they know where she was at the time and they do not believe it's her. The FBI may have another suspect they're focused on in their investigation. Okay. I don't know if this is true. I don't know who her source was. Whenever you're looking at human source information, okay, this is human intelligence or CI human analysis, counterintelligence or human intelligence analysis. It is so important. You got to start with basic facts. And that is, you look at the source description. When you read these reports, it's not going to say, oh, my source is Jason Wilkins at whatever, or whatever the name is. It's going to be, this guy's a mid-level official in the whatever. And there's going to be a source description statement on him. It will not tell you who his identity is, but it will tell you some contextual information about who he is, basic kind of placement and access stuff. How did he come into contact with this information? Was this firsthand or secondhand? Did he observe this, or did he overhear this as it was happening? Or did his mother's cousin's neighbor's ex-wife, her boss, whatever, that was the originator of this information, and it just played telephone until it got back to him, and now he's just giving it to you. So this is one reason why human intelligence analysis can be so difficult. There's actually a few reasons. Number one is all sources have varying motivations for why they are telling you things. And unless you understand source motivation, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to get to the actual truth, because maybe this person is actually trying to be helpful in telling you something that he heard, which is also not true. So he is accurately reporting incorrect information. But you're a human, and your sources would never lie to you. And so you believe that is true, even though it's not. So people can try to do the right thing and just share bad information. That's the first thing. And you say, oh, the source is so nice and he's cooperative and he doesn't indicate any deception, but he's telling you something that's wrong. And then there's deliberate deception or disinformation, which, maybe your source has told you 9 things that are true so that he can slip that 10th thing in there, which is not true, and you believe him. Because you go back into reporting history, every source is going to have a source reporting history. And you go back through there and you say, this source has produced 52 reports and 48 of them have been accurate, and the remaining, how many ever, we don't know. They can't be verified, unknown veracity, whatever. And so you go back there and you say, oh, this is an A-rated source, because most of his stuff, like this guy's been on point. He's been like an A1 source. This is the guy. You should just pretty much believe anything this guy tells you, maybe. Those guys are the most dangerous, because when you have single source information, you have one person telling you something and you have no way to verify whether it's true or not. And you go back and you say, well, this is an A-rated source, like this guy's an all-star. And you want to believe him, or you, maybe not you want to believe him, but you assess that what he's telling you is more likely than not to be true. That is where you can get into some trouble. So I bring this up. I'm not sure, I like seeing all the citizen journalist kind of stuff, where you have, whether they're at InfoWars, they're at whatever news outlet they're at, and they're talking to their contacts in the government or the FBI or at CIA or whatever, and they're getting all this information out. Just remember, if you're a consumer of information, a journalist's, even well-meaning journalists can promote certain messages that their sources want them to promote. And they do that because many of them want to curry favor with this source. Why? Because the journalist wants to be the person that breaks this breaking news. They want to have the exclusive. So in some cases, journalists will just parrot whatever they're told uncritically. Why? Because they want the source to continue sharing this information with them. So just keep that in mind. We should give source ratings to journalists and reporters, honestly. That would probably be a good idea. At any rate, if you're a journalist or if you know journalists, just encourage them. They need to have, and I'm not calling Brianna out. I don't know her. I don't know anything about her other than I think she took over Harrison's show over on InfoWars, the American Journal. You've got to have some analytic tools. Like you really need some just like basic human analytic tradecraft. When you start going through, when you put yourself into a position where people are feeding you information because they want you to report it, not because it's true. I'll just say that and we'll leave it there. Because if this Shawnee Kirkhoff actually is the lady, you know that the people who surround her are going to be in overdrive to discredit certain journalists or to, God forbid, something even worse happens to these journalists who are trying to get the truth out, because these people literally will do anything. Literally, as Gavin Newsom would say. All right, a few more things I want to talk about. Before we get into this, color revolutions are a form of irregular warfare. I do want to play for you before I forget, because I know I'm going to forget. This happened just a few days ago at my buddy's ranch in Central Texas. He shared this video with me. I'm going to share it with you. And listen, it's going to have some foul language. There's some F-bombs going to be dropped. So fair warning, I'm not going to edit it out. It is it's a video of some poachers or maybe some cattle thieves. I'm not sure exactly which they were doing. Maybe technically they could have just been out for a joyride. I don't know. But they clipped the top strand of barbed wire on his ranch. He lives on a big ranch. And they clipped the top strand. They tied together the bottom two strands, and they walked right into his property. And I don't know if they were scouting. Maybe they were trying to poach deer. Maybe they were trying to poach hogs. Maybe they were trying to scout out how much cattle there. I don't know. And I don't think he knows all the details. But this is a video of this incident, this altercation. It is on thermal. Guys, I implore you, if you live anywhere where things go bump in the night, have some optics, whether it's night vision or thermal or both, even better. I implore it. And just think about night vision. Okay. My buddy Homer, who's an Afghan veteran, and he's also 11 Bravo infantry guy. He says, I asked him many years ago, I said, what's sell me on night vision? And I wasn't being resistant. I just said, look, what's kind of the big bottom line on night vision? He said, Mike, it is no light or low light for roughly half the day all year round. Why would you want to spend 12 hours a day squinting or not being able to see anything? I said, yeah, okay, actually. Yeah, you put it like that. That makes a lot of sense. This is really as a civilian. Sorry, I should reframe this. Why should civilians own night vision? At any rate, here is the thermal video again. Cover your ears if you have porcelain sensibilities. Here's the video. And I hope this doesn't blow out your eardrums. I don't know what the audio is going to look like. Here it is.
Y'all don't move and get off them horses right now. Get off them horses right now. The game warden's here. I got your dogs already. You're fucked. Hey, you might as well not run. He's coming for you. Yeah, get bucked off. I got you all recorded on thermals. Yeah. Your asses are in trouble. I swear to God, I'll catch you again. It's over. Y'all are fucked.
All right, at any rate, That was the video. And can you imagine being out there and not having night vision, or being out there and not having thermal to see where these guys on horseback are? Absolutely incredible. All right, there's 5 of them. If you counted them in the video, do a quick salute report. And one did get bucked off there, as you saw. They all were arrested. The game warden and the sheriff's office was out there pretty promptly. And this guy's had a ton of problems with poachers coming onto his land. It's like we go out there and we shoot hogs. And you'd think with all the activity out there, there would not be many poachers, but there are. It's like all the time. It's constant. At any rate, get some optics. See in the dark. That gives you a massive strategic advantage. All right, with that, let's go ahead and get into this thing on irregular warfare and color revolutions. I've been talking about color revolutions, for many years. However, last November, basically as soon as Trump won, you can actually go back and watch this video. It's up on YouTube. Like a day or two after the election, I made this video on color revolutions. I said, look, this is exactly what's going to happen. They're going to organize around ICE, countering ICE, and I basically laid it all out and said, look, here's what they're going to do. And now we've been seeing it all year. The building blocks for a color revolution are being assembled. Remember, we're looking broadly at 3 phases: from protest into resistance, organized resistance, and then finally, if required, revolution in 2028. We are in the protest phase. We have seen a little bit of, I say little, it's relative. We have seen some attempts at individual and small group resistance. All this stuff about blocking ICE vehicles and going out and protesting, and there's a tactic. It is called accompaniment. Basically, these people, they're in these rapid response networks, and like literally their job is to just drive around until they see an ICE convoy and then follow it around and take pictures or video and follow them to where they're going and report on their location. And these are set up in all the major cities. I think all the major cities now have these rapid response networks. And it's just to see something, say something. But at a very basic level, it is intelligence gathering. It absolutely is. So these people are gathering intelligence on ICE, not just taking the license plate numbers, but to the point where they're now taking VIN numbers of these vehicles. And of course, we've seen some ICE agents doxed and so on. At any rate, all this stuff is a form of irregular warfare. And I bring this up because the DOD, and some people jumped on me for not calling it the Department of War. Sorry, but you can see the logo right there at the top. It is still officially the Department of Defense. I don't care what Trump calls it or the White House calls it. It is still the Department of Defense. At any rate, they released this latest guidance or DOD instructions on irregular warfare. This was published back in September, but only recently made public, I think like a couple days ago. And I'll just read this for you here. IW, or irregular warfare, is a form of warfare where states and non-state actors campaign to ensure or coerce states or other groups through indirect, non-attributable, or asymmetric activities. You know what? Let me bring this document up because that's really tiny text for me to read. There we go. All right, so let's break this down. Irregular warfare is a form of warfare. Shocker. So states and non-state actors. States would be nation states like the United States or China. And non-state actors, these could be terrorist groups, they could be militias, insurgent groups, any kind of political or any kind of non-state actor. So these are actors below that of the nation state, more or less independent actors. And I say independent actors, they could be working on behalf of a foreign government or working on behalf of the United States government, like NGOs, for instance. NGO would be non-governmental organization, would be a non-state actor. To assure or coerce, so remember, irregular warfare, any kind of, or we say irregular warfare, but this applies to insurgency and counterinsurgency as well. To assure foreign governments, to try to bolster foreign governments against irregular warfare from another adversary, or to coerce or to conduct irregular warfare to try to tear down a foreign government, or any other group through indirect. So we're not dropping, irregular warfare is not dropping bombs on people. That's conventional war. Irregular warfare is non-conventional and unconventional. So we're not dropping bombs. It's not conventional military force. things like political warfare and economic warfare and other forms of not typically nonviolent, not always, but typically nonviolent coercion that is indirect. So we're not attacking a government directly, we're indirectly attacking a foreign government. It can be non-attributable. So in most cases, you do not want the United States to have its fingerprints all over this movement. In some cases, maybe you would, but in general, this is about enabling foreign groups to overthrow their government or to act as a coercive force to get a government to do something or to not do something, or just overthrow the government altogether, and I will get there, or asymmetric activities. So asymmetric meaning not symmetrical. So if you want to attack a foreign government, you could attack its economy. That would be an asymmetric attack. You're wearing down that government through attacking its finances, just as an example. Irregular warfare provides an important complement to other joint force activities, operations, and investments in both competition and conflict. Irregular warfare strategies and tactics can involve the threat or the use of force, including the use of non-lethal weapons for purposes other than physical domination over an adversary. Again, this is not about dropping bombs, but it's not necessarily always going to be nonviolent. States and non-state actors can conduct irregular warfare when they cannot achieve their strategic objectives by non-warfare activities or conventional war. This is a great point. We have a military that could, let's look at Venezuela. Okay. Could we bomb Venezuela into submission? Could we just level the entire Maduro regime? Yeah, of course we could. Probably wouldn't want to do that. So let's say that we could not achieve U.S. objectives, U.S. geopolitical or geostrategic objectives through the use of military force. Well, now you have an option. If you have a developed irregular warfare capacity, you can conduct irregular warfare against them as opposed to regular warfare. And this is a very important point. And I want to get to this sentence right here. Alongside allies and partners, the DoD maintains the capability to erode an adversary's legitimacy, influence, and political will. This is very important because governments, whether you're looking at the United States government or literally any government around the world, any form of government, it doesn't matter what kind it is, stands on three pillars: legitimacy, authority, and capacity. If you want to wear down and overthrow a foreign government, you erode its legitimacy, its authority, and or its capacity. Legitimacy is the recognized right of the people to be in power. So, for instance, President Trump is a legitimate president because he won legally the 2024 presidential election. He is very legitimate. If he had not won the election but taken the White House by force, then many people would say, of course, he's illegitimate. But because he won the election, he's a legitimate president. He has legitimacy. And I know some people will never say Trump is their president. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the plurality or the majority of this country looks at Trump and says, I may not like the guy, but he was legitimately elected. He won the election fair and square. Next is authority, and that is the willingness of anyone to obey your laws or edicts. Why does Mexico not obey U.S. laws? Because that's their country. Why does Mexico not obey the edicts or every wish, hope, and desire of President Trump? Because he doesn't have that kind of authority in Mexico. Now, maybe he could gain that one day, but he doesn't have it now. Inside our own borders, the reason why, there's, you remember the thing, become ungovernable or whatever their little thing was, that is about striking the authority of this presidential administration. Disobeying certain laws or acting in opposition to certain laws. That is about undermining the authority, say immigration enforcement, for instance. When you have state governors and city mayors come out and saying, we are not going to support this. We're going to block this every way we can, through every legal channel we can, every legitimate channel we can. That is undermining the authority here. And then finally, you have capacity. So it takes personnel to do things, and it takes equipment, and it takes money, funding, resources to do things. And so if you want to take an indirect approach and try to undermine, say, this government's capacity, what do? Well, you attack its finances. You indirectly attack its personnel, or you try to get people to walk off the job, or you otherwise reduce their capacity, their personnel, equipment, funding to do the things that they want to do. They're not talking about conducting necessarily, not talking about conducting violence. But if Democrats win the House in the 26 midterms and they somehow are able to get this through the Senate, and they simply cut the funding, they cut the funding for ICE, immigration enforcement operations, that would be reducing the capacity of the administration or reducing the capacity of whatever they dislike. So those are the three things. If you want to topple any government in the world, you attack its legitimacy, its authority, and its capacity to govern. Because what happens is when you have someone who's in charge, but there's a substantial portion of the populace who do not respect the authority of the people in charge, and at the point where the people in charge don't have the personnel, funding, or equipment to do their jobs, to fulfill public services, they lose legitimacy. You start to say, no one's actually paying attention to this guy. And even if we were paying attention, they don't have the capacity to go out and do the things that they want to do, or they don't have the capacity to fulfill public services. I'm really starting to question whether this guy's really in charge. And so that would be undermining the legitimacy. So I bring this up because this is exactly what a color revolution does. We're talking about irregular warfare. This is done primarily through non-conventional and unconventional means. So non-conventional would be things that do not involve tanks and bombers. That's conventional warfare. Using economic warfare, political warfare, disinformation is not a tank or a bomber. That it would be non-conventional means. Unconventional means it's the special force, U.S. Army Special Forces, one of their missions, and there's things like there's all sorts of different things, but insurgency, the use of a foreign people to fight against their government, would be an example of unconventional warfare, although it does encompass some other things. So I bring this up because eroding an adversary's legitimacy, influence, and political will is exactly what a color revolution does. And they do this through mass protest. A lot of people said, well, Mike, what did this mass protest actually accomplish? I saw, the color revolution failed because No Kings 2.0 didn't overthrow the Trump administration. So they failed. Guys, that's not the purpose of these mass protests. Not yet, at least. That's coming maybe in 27 or 28. Just last week, there was a video where the indivisible people basically said, yeah, that's probably not coming until 28. And a couple of people kind of pushed back and said, I don't know, Mike, they look ready. They're not ready. They absolutely are not ready. And I'll give you a really good example. I'm getting sidetracked here. But, the last show I think I did was October 28th. And they had Indivisible just announced their boycott of Spotify. And I was looking today at the stock price, and I actually think basically having very little impact on Spotify. Or maybe they're having some impact. This all goes back to power. Remember, what is power? Power is your ability to gain the submission of someone else. And if that other person does not submit to your will or does not submit to you and what you want to have them to do, you simply do not have the power that you thought you did. So I look at this boycott of Spotify, and it's only been going a couple weeks now, almost 2 weeks. I've seen a lot of media coverage. I've seen a lot more smoke than fire. I look at Spotify's share prices. I don't see it. It's been on a downward trend for a while, but actually let me pull this up because I did clip this. I don't think it got into the slide today. Hang on, let me see if it did. No, it didn't. But I don't see Spotify share price dropping. I don't think this is a Disney where you have millions of Americans canceling their Disney subscription because Jimmy Kimmel was fired. I don't see that. Basically, I see a lot of Spotify users that say, no, actually, I kind of like the Spotify music service that I'm getting. And we'll see. Maybe that will change. But I'm seeing a lot more smoke than fire right now. So that to me, there's a thing in organizing. There's a concept in organizing. It is called, they're called structure tests. And let's take an example of of a union trying to unionize a factory. Okay. So you have a lot of people who, if they express support for unionization, they could just be fired. They say, we want to start an XYZ factory union. Their employer can just say, nope, you're out of here, bud. Bye. You're fired. And so there is some level of risk for them. And so what they want to do is show their employer, show the factory, that a majority of the shop floor, a majority of the employees actually support unionizing, forming a union. And in many cases, a lot of these people are not going to strike. They do not want to walk off their job. They do not want to get fired. They want to organize, but they're not ready to take that level of risk. So instead, what they do is they do these things called structure tests. And they say, all right, guys, tomorrow morning, we're all going to wear these buttons. And if 100 people, you really want a super majority of employees to want to unionize, but let's say you have 51%, and they say, I pledge my support. I'll sign the union card when it comes to that time. And, but they're obviously not willing to strike. So a structure test is simply trying to get your people to take some minor action, not striking, but take some minor action to express their support. So if you have 100 people that say, yes, we want to unionize, but 27 wear a button to work tomorrow, you've just failed that structure test, because you've got verbal commitments from 100 people, but only 27 people actually showed up with that button on when you have asked all 100 people to do this. So I look at that and I say, well, there's obviously some support, but people are not ready, not willing to take that level of risk. And it's the same exact thing in a color revolution that is building. There is going to be a time, and it's going to start probably next spring, where they will start taking much more risks. But I look at Spotify, the Spotify boycott, and I look at that as a structure test. The Indivisible people, which is the country's largest protest organizing group, they're kind of the big top of the umbrella for this color revolution movement that's building. And what was 11 or 7, I forget how many million. Was it 17 million? No, I don't know. I don't remember how many people it was. It was millions of people that they claimed canceled their Disney subscriptions. I'm not seeing that kind of effect here on Spotify. So I'm looking at the Spotify boycott. And if you missed the show, there's a Spotify boycott because Spotify was running ICE ads. And the Indivisible people wrote a letter to Spotify, the executives, and they said, look, we want you to meet with us on no later than this day. And we want you to change what you're doing. We want you to stop running these ICE recruitment ads on your music streaming and podcast streaming platform. And apparently Spotify said no. And so just a couple of days later, Indivisible said, all right, we're going to go strike. Well, I'm not saying Spotify get cratered. So I look at this as a structure test, and I don't see Indivisible taking a big victory lap on this. That could change in the future. At any rate, where I'm going with this is they are not ready. I mean, if you can't even get people to cancel their Spotify subscriptions, you can't get people to move from protest to resistance, then you're not ready to move into phase 3 yet. Remember, we're looking at 3 phases: protest, resistance, and then revolution if it comes to that in 28 and 29. So if you can't even move people past the protest phase into organized resistance, they're definitely not ready for phase 3. And so that's where I think we are. There are going to be other boycotts. There are going to be other attempts. There are going to be other things. Remember, mass protest is the bedrock of this for a couple of reasons. Number one, you've got to have mass involvement. Remember, these mass protests are optics. It's basically what they are. It's a structure test. You have a lot of people out there. They say, yeah, we don't like Trump. How many people will actually turn out to the protests? And that is a structure test. You're testing the structure of your organization, basically. And when you have 50 million people, or maybe not 50, let's say you have 20 million people go up and sign up on mobilize.us or wherever, and they say, yeah, we're going to attend this protest. And 3 to 5 million people show up. That's it's a penance. I mean, that's a lot of people, but it's nowhere near the 20 million people who at least pledged their support to show up. I think that as a form of a structure test, that allows Indivisible to test how serious this movement is. So I think that's what we're seeing here. So I bring all this stuff up because color revolutions are a form of irregular warfare. They do want to erode an adversary. In this case, they want to erode the Trump administration's legitimacy, influence, and political will. And they're doing this beneath the threshold of what we think is traditional warfare. They're going to use things, they've been using things like economic warfare and political warfare and using all these different tactics, but the strategy is the same: to erode or undermine the legitimacy of the Trump administration. And I've said this many times, but basically what could end up happening in 28 is if we do see this color revolution movement actually come to fruition, and they do progress from phase 2, which is organized resistance, into phase 3, which is the actual color revolution, it will almost certainly, I don't want to say it will almost certainly, but chances are very good. I would say it's likely that it will coincide with the outcome of the 2028 presidential election. If the Democrat wins, they obviously don't need to escalate to phase 3. If J.D. Vance wins and they can contest that election, we're going to see this endless parade of election experts and political pundits. And I've told you about the six pillars of society that they want to peel back support for the Trump administration. When you start seeing CEOs, the CEO of Ford or GE or NVIDIA or whoever, start to come out and say, we have serious doubts that J.D. Vance or whoever, whatever MAGA candidate, we have serious doubts that this was a free and fair election. And when that endless parade is broadcast on the news 24/7, and they're able to build a narrative that Trump stole the election for his successor, he stole the election for the J.D. Vance or the MAGA candidate, that is going to be the justification that this movement uses to move from resistance to the Trump administration to revolution against the Trump administration, or what's left of it, and the incoming Vance administration, with the end goal of getting the MAGA candidate to leave D.C. and getting the Democrat candidate, who they will allege is the rightful victor, the legitimate legal winner of the election, putting him in the White House. That's the end goal here of the color revolution. And I'm seeing these people hop on YouTube and they leave comments, like kind of threatening comments. They're like, "Oh, Mike, we're watching your show and you're carrying water for the Trump administration. We're not going to forget. We're going to remember everyone who supported ICE. We're going to remember all these people who, guys, that does not deter me or coerce me whatsoever. I do not want the communists to win. I do not want the socialists to win. It is simple as that. And unfortunately, if the color revolution succeeds, that is exactly what we're going to get. So with that, I want everyone to understand that this is what we are facing. This is what we're up against over the next 3 years. This movement is building. I implore you to act like it. You have to get organized at your local level. That is step one. People say, all right, Mike, I understand this. I see the color revolution as a threat. It's legitimate. What do we do? It starts with counter-organizing. It starts with organizing at your local level. And that means getting your friends and family caught up to speed on what's happening. And you can see how this is a Herculean effort, because a lot of people have their heads in the sand and they either don't understand or they don't care, or they're otherwise ambivalent about it. And it is your job to inform and influence them as to exactly what's going on. And when you can link back kind of the definition, the latest definition from the Defense Department of irregular warfare, and explain how that perfectly describes color revolutions, exactly what is being built, maybe you'll have some success in informing and influencing your peers as to their reality. All right, let's move on here to the shout out of the week. I have 2 shout outs of the week this week. The first goes out to Glenn Beck. Listen, I used to listen to all 3 hours of the Glenn Beck program back, 10 plus years ago. And my dad and I went to the 9/12 rally in D.C. in September 11th, 2012. And I was a big Glenn Beck supporter. So this is absolutely not coming from, and I basically just stopped listening to him for whatever reason. But The shout out of the week. Listen, this video that he played on his show like 2 weeks ago. This is from this Indivisible live stream. And Leah Greenberg, that's the lady on the screen there. She was talking about the colors. They're in the process of choosing a color. And you want to look at a pretty good indicator of a color evolution. When this movement says, oh, we're going to brand ourselves with this yellow color. We're going to choose yellow as our unity symbol or unity color. Guys, that's a pretty strong indicator that they're building a color revolution movement here. At any rate, when I downloaded that video, I put my little Foxhead watermark on there because I was like, man, people are going to just gank this and go put it on their own shows. And so now this is the second Blaze TV show or Blaze whatever show that has used this video. And listen, I'm not asking them to put up a neon sign with my name or Forward Observer on it. I'm just saying I spend inordinate amounts of time reading through blogs and reading emails and watching videos every week. I mean, just hours and hours, countless tens of hours every week digging into this stuff. You know, a little shout out, maybe wouldn't kill anyone. Since I'm the guy going through and finding up, you know, and it's not only me, it's several other people are doing this, like Data Republican and Mike Benz and lots of other people are digging into this. But, you know, a little shout out probably wouldn't hurt, especially because I put the Forward Observer bumper thing on the very end of this video. And of course, you know, that gets clipped off. Anyway, I know this because you see my little watermark there on the screen and they ganked that from me. All right. The second shout out of the week goes to Oscar Zimmerman. And I think he's down in Australia, but he writes, shout out to Mike and his area study plans. I've started using listen, Google Maps overlays. If that's what you have, that's fine. I would not want to use Google Map overlays, but if that's what you want to use, that's fine. I would much rather use like ArcGIS or QGIS or even Google Earth or something. But if that's what you're working with, that's what you're working with. I've started using my own Google Maps overlays to note critical infrastructure, flood hazards, evacuation routes, homeless camps, and most of all, intelligence gaps. I can note the location of the CCTV cameras, gun and liquor stores, friendly locations, and grocery stores. You can draw on the map, make shapes around areas that need to be explored, and then go out and walk through them, noting anything of interest. So he's talking about actual reconnaissance here. A local example, we all believed there was a big camp of drug addicts in a certain patch of dry swampland. I went and walked through the area at lunchtime, no sign of any camps, litter, fires, nothing. So I'm guessing they are further downstream. Guess where I'm going tomorrow. On the map, I can change the color from gray, which is an intel gap, to green, which is clear to visit. A physical map in a binder is great, but the online version is orders of magnitude better. Thanks again for your area study book. Highly recommended. Well, I really appreciate hearing that. I love when people read the book and they say, you know what, it would behoove me if I did understand a little bit more about my own local area, my own operating environment, whether you're in peacetime or wartime, emergency, disaster, whatever happens, your knowledge of the area and the local terrain and the 6 layers of your operating environment. If you don't know them, I'll run them off very briefly. Physical terrain and weather, the human terrain, so the people, the groups, the subgroups, their cultural beliefs, etc., who live around you, human terrain, critical infrastructure, politics and governance. Who are the people who make the laws that they want you to obey? That's kind of important to understand. Next is safety, security, and defense. So military and law enforcement around you, probably be good to at least have a general awareness of what's out there and who's in charge. And then lastly, economics and finance. That's the 6th layer of your operating environment. The more that you understand about that, the more prepared you can be for the future. And of course, as always, the show is brought to you by the Area Intelligence Handbook. It is available over at Amazon.com. I am in the process of updating. By the way, the ebook is $10. And I think maybe even you can catch it maybe on an Amazon discount. I don't know. But it's $10 and it will take you through the steps of building an area study. It will tell you what information you need and in some cases where to find it. I do not have any print copies left because I'm updating it for the 2nd edition, and that will be rolling out later this month or in December. I don't have a publication date, but I think we did try to determine it's going to be all up and ready by December 9th. the second edition, and there's a lot more information that's going in the second edition, mainly resources like websites and where to find information, stuff that I've come across over the past roughly 3 years or so. And the Area Intelligence Handbook is up on Amazon.com. If you have purchased it, please do leave me a 5-star rating and review if you think I deserve it. Last point here is I was on vacation last week. We went to Orlando, and normally we do Disney and Universal. We did not do Disney this time. It's the first time we've been to Orlando. We did not step foot on a Disney property. We did not give them a single cent of our money. And the sad thing is Disney simply will not miss that. But, it's great for the kids. Disney is a fun place. Universal is fun. It's great for the kids. It's a lot of fun. Roller coasters, rides, attractions, all that stuff. Those are just fun places to be, especially if you're a kid. And, of course, Disney does not miss us, but, we kind of did miss going there. At any rate, I did have some time to read, and I was reading about some stuff from Saul Alinsky, and I came across this book. He wrote this book on John L. Lewis. And John L. Lewis was the founding president of the Congress of Industrial Organizations. That is the CIO in what is today the AFL-CIO, which is this mega union of unions. And John L. Lewis, believe it or not, was a staunch anti-communist and anti-socialist. And you say, that's kind of weird. Apparently, this was a time where unions, at least ostensibly, were actually fighting for the middle class, at least allegedly. I don't know. And but of course, it's a lot more about power, I think, today than protecting the actual middle class. At any rate, this guy did something extremely odd. He hired and promoted these communist union organizers, despite their support of communism and socialism. Now, remember, he's an anti-communist and anti-socialist, but he was hiring these leftist union organizers. And why? Because they were so effective. They were so effective that he would hire them to win the toughest union battles and organize these the biggest worker strikes. And he did that because they're so much more effective than any other organizations. And once they had won that union battle, he would just fire them. And it just goes to show community organizing. By the way, the CIA, I think this was founded like back in the 30s or so. And it just goes to show you how long community organizing has been around. There's a reason why it is a career path on the left. There's a reason why community organizing is a career path on the left. And because it is extremely effective, and it is a fantastic tool to use when you're trying to build political power or use political power. And Saul Alinsky wrote this biography of John L. Lewis, and he said Lewis hired them because he believed that he could control them, allegedly. And when questioned about why he employed communist community organizers despite being a staunch anti-communist, he said, "Who gets the bird, the hunter or the dog?" And the dog brings the bird back to the hunter. And that was his rationale. Basically, uses of the enemy. So, organizing is an extremely effective left-wing tactic. The right needs to get good at doing this. I have a lot more to come on right-wing organizing. I think, what day did I say that? Maybe December 2nd, I'm going to do another free webinar on counter-organizing. I will probably announce that next week, Tuesday, December 2nd. I'll do another webinar on counter-organizing, how to organize your community. Super, super important stuff, like vital. If you don't understand organizing at the local level, you will lose between 26 and 28. Really as simple as that. As a reminder, obligatory closeout for the show, one of my favorite quotes: "The best organized group usually wins." And that means the group with the most internal solidarity. And I ask, which group in the United States, which groups or subgroups have the most internal solidarity? They are probably going to win. I encourage you to get organized and to build internal solidarity. Remember, your organizations are like a fist. If your fist is undisciplined and it's loose and you go punch someone, you're going to break your hand maybe. But if your fist is balled up and it's tight and you punch someone, You have internal discipline. You're internally strong means you're going to be externally strong. This is why smaller, highly disciplined units and armies can defeat much larger forces because of their internal discipline and solidarity. That's why that is it's not a paradox. I don't know what it is, but that's the rule. If you want to have an effective organization, you have got to be internally strong, got to be internally tight. And that will allow you to punch above your weight. You think about these single issue organizations. That's all they do. They just lobby, they campaign, they fight battles for one thing. And the reason why they're so strong is because they're not trying to do 10 things. They're trying to do one thing. They're throwing their entire weight, their entire focus, their entire discipline, everything behind one objective. And they win a fight. And they win power, and they use power, and they move on to the next place, and they go fight there. Focus on one thing. Find one battle that you want to fight at the local level, and throw your attention and focus and resources and effort behind that, and organize your community. Remember, there's three things. Is it widely felt? Is it deeply felt? Is it winnable? So pick something that's winnable. Pick something that's widely felt. It affects a lot of people. And it deeply affects a lot of people. The more people affected and the more deeply they're affected, the more likely it is that you will be able to agitate and organize around that issue. I'll leave it at that. But the best organized group usually wins, and that means the group with the most internal solidarity. And he's basically talking about low-intensity conflict here. Lastly, now is the time to go out and collect local information that you can use. Happy Veterans Day, of course, to everyone. And I will do some Q&A if you do have any questions, or drop them into the chat with a capital Q, please. That helps me find those questions a lot more easily. Peter asks, can you elaborate on the difference between the violent revolutionary communist left and the nonviolent progressive left? They are at odds with each other, but both want to overthrow the government. Well, yes. The left is not a monolith. So broadly, I think you can divide the left into about two camps, and this is just like the broadest, most general sense. There's the revolutionary left, which does want to overthrow the government, and then there's the establishment or progressive left, and they don't want to overthrow the government, so to speak. They're revolutionaries in the sense that they want a rapid political shift in D.C., but they're not revolutionaries in the sense that they want to actually overthrow the government. They just want to take it over. They're the social democrats. They're the more or less the reformists. They just want to reshape the federal government in their own image. Whereas you have the Antifas and the abolitionists who actually do want to overthrow the government through insurrectionary violence. So I look at this and I say they fly different flags, but they're marching in the same general direction, in that they have a common enemy. But yes, both of these sides are diametrically opposed to each other. There is no Democrat that supports the ends of Antifa. Antifa, they want to abolish all forms of hierarchy. They want to abolish prisons and abolish capitalism and abolish police and abolish any kind of federal, state, local government, whatever, because they say all those things are oppressive. And you will not see many, if at all, any Democrats saying, yeah, actually abolishing the federal government's a great idea. No, of course not. They worship government. They don't want to overthrow the government. They just want to be in charge of it. They want to overthrow the people in charge right now, but they want the power that they get from government. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, if I didn't say it already, happy Veterans Day, of course, to everyone. What are the best practices for collecting information on local groups? Yeah, great question. So remember, you have 4 primary collection disciplines or methods: human intelligence, open source intelligence, signals intelligence, and imagery intelligence. So you just look at each of those collection disciplines and you say, well, what assets or platforms do I have to collect through these things on one side? And then on the other side, you say, well, what are my collection requirements? What are my intel gaps? What are my actual requirements I'm trying to answer? And then you simply match up the best assets and sources to satisfy your requirements. in a very general sense. One thing I think everyone should be doing, you should get on Twitter, you should get on Instagram, you should get on Threads, you should get on TikTok, you should get on, obviously, Facebook and the internet in general, and start looking for groups. Start looking for these revolutionary groups. One thing that I learned when I went down to the No Kings rally here locally back on October 18th or somewhere around there, and I ran into a couple of guys who were from the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and that is an actual revolutionary party. They're not your standard Democrats. They're that's the revolutionary left. And I did not realize that they were trying to establish a foothold here. And of course, they're at No Kings to rub elbows and meet and network and talk to people and recruit. And they invited me to this book club. I started talking to them. I don't think they knew who I was, but they invited me to a book club, and they said, we're going to talk about whatever book. And they said, oh, yeah, and of course, read the Communist Manifesto if you haven't already. And I said, yeah, sure, of course. So you got to get out and go, you got to go fish where the fish are. If you go, like these No Kings, these protests they're literally, there's dozens of a day, like 40 to 80 a day nationally during the weekday. And then most weekends we're looking at hundreds, like 200 to 400 plus protests. And then of course, in the big national days of actions, there's like 2,000, 1,500 to 2,000 protests nationwide. Go down there and just this one guy was passing out these leaflets, and I got one. There was a QR code on there, and I took a picture. I did the QR code thing, and it took me to a webpage from my county, and it had all these different left-wing groups and organizations on one single page. And I said, this guy doesn't realize it, but he just saved me a massive amount of time. So go fish where the fish are. Go collect in information-rich environments. And these protests are a really good place to start. And then, of course, just start for your county or your state. PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation. I think they're trying to expand. Look for all the communist and socialist groups, DSA, of course. And I start on there, and then just go hobnob with people. Go to your county Democrat meetings and just listen and learn. And eventually you will look at, you'll find a little piece of yarn. You'll overhear something or see something or read something, a little piece of yarn, and you start to pull that piece of yarn. And then all of a sudden you're like dealing with half a ball of yarn in your hands, and it all starts with just that little first piece. Will the above be an area study, the second edition of the Area Study Handbook? Yeah, I'll probably expand some of the stuff in there about, especially open source. It will not be a collection manual, but I will have some collection tips in it. Please teach the lessons learned from the Nicaraguan Revolution in 1979. It would be really useful to learn how the left thinks. I have like 2 or 3 books on that, and unfortunately I have not read them, but I will. I will read them and get back to you. All right, guys, that's all. We're over an hour now. I appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, of course. And everyone have a great rest of your Veterans Day. I'll be back Tuesday on these shows. Just a couple of dates. Remember, Tuesday, December 2nd, I'm going to do this counter-organizing webinar. Watch out. I'll probably announce that next week. And then December 9th, I think I'm going to have this new book, the second edition of the Area Intelligence Handbook, out for publication, second edition. Last question, right at the buzzer. What ways can drones be used from an intelligence perspective? Well, a drone is an ISR platform, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So, guys, remember, whenever you're collecting information, okay, typically, if you're doing it right, you're going after specific pieces of information, okay? Call them specific information requirements or whatever, collection requirements. You're talking to someone or you're looking at someone conducting reconnaissance, whatever. You're looking for specific pieces of information. So write those down. What are you looking for? And this is especially important if you task someone else to go out and you say, all right, Brian, I want you to go down to this protest. And you could say, you know what, Brian, report back to me everything that you think is important. But what he thinks important and what you think is important may not be the same things. So Brian may be leaving out very important, key, critical details because he doesn't think they're important. But that's exactly what you want to know. So it is your job, if you're going to task out collection, tell people what you are looking for, what pieces of information that you want. Do not leave it to them to give you what they want to give you, because it may not be what you want. It's like, if you want an answer, you got to ask the question that will get you that answer. And a requirement is a statement or a question that describes an intelligence gap. So if your intelligence gap might be, how many people showed up for this protest? Or identify the number of people who showed up for this protest. That would be a collection requirement. And now Brian has, 4 or 5 things. Now he can go down to the protest and he can say, okay, well, I estimate there's like 700 people here. Okay, check. And identify all political parties with representation. So he can walk around to the booths or the tables, or he can collect all the literature and say, all right, there's DSA, PSL, Democrat Party, CPUSA, whatever, RevCom, Revolutionary Communist Party. Okay, great. So I just answered that question. You got to give these people what to look for. So with that as the basis of our understanding, now we just apply that to drones. Well, what are you trying to do with a drone? Are we trying to see if this bridge is out? Are we trying to see how bad this flooding is? Is this road flooded or this pasture flooded? Or there's smoke over there? What is it? Is it a house on fire? Is it the chemical plant that's on fire? So, let's see, just broadly, there's different kinds of reconnaissance, and there maybe you use a drone just to go out and say, oh, look, we're going to go conduct reconnaissance in this area, and we're just going to go see what's out there. And maybe you don't have any kind of like real specific collection requirements. Maybe just like identify human activity, identify vehicles or equipment you see in this area, identify any, this is a big one, identify any changing terrain features. Like, you go out there and you say, oh, well, this part of this forest was just cleared. All the trees were cut down. Okay, that's significant. What are they doing there? Or there's a new road here. Or I'm seeing a lot of tire tracks, and this is obviously someone or some people have been driving in and out of here, and they have worn down this area, and now they're basically creating a little path or a little road out there. So there's just all sorts of different things. I don't know, Iceman, if that answers your question, but go and just think about what information you're trying to collect and start there. But, having a little DJI drone or whatever, 3DR, whatever you got, I think all that stuff, I have them. I think everyone should have a drone. Just the utility is just absolutely incredible. All right. Everyone, that's going to do it. We appreciate your support. I will be back next Tuesday on the show. We'll be back tomorrow morning for early warning. And by the way, if you're in the Bryan College Station, Texas area, I will be at the True Texas Project tonight, I know it's short notice, giving a talk on Color Revolution 101. And, I'll record that. Maybe I'll put it up here on the YouTube channel for everyone. All right, everyone, thanks so much for your support. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day. And until next time, be well and stay out front.